morning, everyone. Have you ever looked at someone you care about, maybe a friend, a partner, or someone you're dating and thought, why does he act like he doesn't care? The blank stares, the delayed replies, the emotional distance, it can feel cold, confusing, and sometimes heartbreaking. But here's the truth. What you see on the surface is not always what's going on inside. Many guys are raised in a world where vulnerability is mistaken for weakness. So instead of showing emotion, they mask it. Instead of saying what they feel, they shut down. That silence you hear, that detachment you feel, it's often the sound of someone who's battling uncertainty, fear, or even deep affection that they don't know how to express. Let me be clear, this doesn't excuse hurtful behavior, but understanding the psychology behind that I don't care attitude can help you make clearer decisions about who deserves your time, your energy, and your heart. Here's what's really going on behind that distant behavior. He might care too much and is scared of rejection. He could be emotionally inexperienced or unsure how to express his feelings. Sometimes he's trying to protect himself or you from getting too close too fast. Other times, yes, he really may not be emotionally invested, and it's crucial to know the difference. The key is not to chase clarity from someone who won't give it, but to recognize the signs, trust your intuition, and communicate your boundaries. So the next time he acts like he doesn't care, ask yourself, is he hiding emotion or showing me the truth? Either way, you deserve honesty, not emotional games. The I don't care act is often a mask. Many men are taught to hide vulnerability, leading to emotionally distant behavior. Fear of rejection or deep feelings. Sometimes he cares deeply but doesn't know how to express it. Lack of emotional tools. He might be emotionally inexperienced or unequipped to communicate openly. Self-protection mechanisms. Emotional distancing can be a way of controlling intimacy and avoiding pain. There's also the possibility he truly doesn't care. It's important to discern the difference between emotional unavailability and emotional manipulation. Clarity and self-respect matter most. Don't chase answers from someone unwilling to communicate. Protect your emotional well-being. Let me know if you'd like this speech adjusted for a specific audience, e.g., motivational talk, podcast, school, or relationship workshop. So when someone acts like they don't care, especially in a romantic or emotionally intimate setting, it's easy to take that behavior at face value. Cold replies, missed calls, lack of eye contact, or seemingly indifferent reactions can all signal disinterest on the surface. But many times, this I don't care attitude is a carefully constructed facade rather than a reflection of true emotional detachment. In many cultures, men are subtly or even overtly taught from a young age that showing emotion is a liability. Phrases like man up, don't cry, or be tough shape the emotional language men learn and internalize. Vulnerability becomes associated with weakness, and over time, expressing genuine feelings feels unsafe or even shameful. So instead of admitting fear, love, confusion, or sadness, some men learn to suppress those feelings entirely, replacing them with silence, sarcasm, or aloofness. What looks like someone who doesn't care is often someone who doesn't know how to show they care without feeling exposed. It's not that the emotion isn't there, it's that the roadmap to expressing it is missing. This is especially true in relationships where emotional vulnerability is key to intimacy. The pressure to maintain a cool or detached persona can override the instinct to connect. He might be sitting with 1,000 thoughts about whether he's enough, whether he's safe with you, or whether getting closer will lead to pain. But rather than say that out loud, he builds a wall, puts his hands in his pockets, and shrugs. Of course, this doesn't mean every man who acts distant is secretly overflowing with feelings, but many are operating from emotional blueprints that never included healthy communication. Their way of coping becomes avoidance, silence, or a false display of disinterest, when in reality, they may be feeling more than they're willing or able to show. Understanding this doesn't mean tolerating poor treatment, but it does help explain why some people seem emotionally unavailable. What we interpret as not caring may actually be a defense mechanism rooted in years of unspoken pressure to never let anyone see what's really going on inside. When someone appears emotionally distant, one of the most common but overlooked reasons is fear, specifically the fear of rejection or the overwhelming nature of deep emotional attachment. For many men, emotional investment can feel like stepping into dangerous territory. The closer they get to someone, the more vulnerable they become. And with vulnerability comes the risk of being hurt, misunderstood, or abandoned. Fear of rejection isn't always loud and obvious. It can show up as delayed text responses, vague answers, detachment in conversations, or inconsistent behavior. He might pull away just when things start to feel real, not because he doesn't care, but because he's scared of where it's heading. That fear often stems from past experiences, relationships where trust was broken, efforts went unnoticed, or vulnerability was met with ridicule or dismissal. Even childhood experiences, such as emotional neglect or lack of affirmation, can plant seeds of insecurity that grow into adulthood and affect how someone approaches emotional intimacy. Deep feelings can also trigger a sort of emotional paralysis. The stronger his emotions, the more pressure he feels to get it right. He might be terrified of saying the wrong thing, doing something that ruins the connection, or simply not living up to the expectations he thinks you have of him. So instead of engaging more deeply, he emotionally checks out. This detachment isn't a lack of feeling, it's the result of feeling too much and not knowing how to handle it. It's also important to understand that many people have a push-pull dynamic when it comes to emotional closeness. They crave connection but fear what it might cost, so they inch forward, then retreat. They give a little, then pull back. This back and forth isn't always a game. It can be a sign of internal conflict. I want to be close, but I'm afraid you'll leave. I care, but if you reject me, it will confirm all the fears I already carry about not being enough. So when he acts like he doesn't care, ask yourself, is this someone who's truly indifferent or someone who's terrified of getting hurt? Often, it's the latter, because real feelings, especially unspoken ones, are heavy. And if he's not equipped to handle them, distance becomes his default protection. When someone seems emotionally unavailable or indifferent, it's easy to label them as cold or uncaring. But often the real issue isn't a lack of emotion, it's a lack of emotional tools. These tools include the ability to recognize feelings, put them into words, process them in a healthy way, and communicate them effectively. If someone never learned how to do those things, their emotional responses will often come across as distant, confusing, or even dismissive. For many men, emotional intelligence wasn't something they were encouraged to develop. They weren't taught how to name what they were feeling beyond angry or fine. Growing up, they may have received more praise for being logical, strong, or self-controlled, and less support when it came to being expressive, reflective, or emotionally transparent. As a result, they might genuinely struggle to identify what they feel, let alone how to express it to someone else. This isn't just a communication problem, it's a foundational gap in emotional education. When we say someone lacks emotional tools, we're talking about the absence of skills like self-awareness, empathy, vulnerability, and emotional regulation. Imagine asking someone to build a house without a hammer, nails, or blueprints. That's what it's like expecting emotional intimacy from someone who never learned the building blocks of emotional connection. So when a man pulls back, avoids eye contact, or shrugs off serious conversations with humor or silence, it might not be because he doesn't care. He may simply not know how to participate in those moments in a meaningful way. He might feel the pressure to respond but doesn't have the emotional vocabulary or confidence to do so without feeling overwhelmed or exposed. Additionally, in romantic or high-stakes emotional settings, this lack of tools becomes even more visible. Conversations that require vulnerability, like talking about fears, boundaries, or feelings, can trigger discomfort, anxiety, or defensiveness. Instead of engaging, someone who lacks emotional tools might shut down, deflect, or even lash out, not because they're cruel, but because they're emotionally unprepared. This lack doesn't mean someone is incapable of growth, but it does mean they may not be ready for the kind of depth, communication, and emotional presence a healthy relationship requires. Recognizing this can help you set realistic expectations and decide whether you're dealing with someone who can grow or someone who will remain stuck in emotional silence. When a person seems emotionally distant or disengaged, it's easy to assume they're uninterested or emotionally unavailable. But what's often happening beneath the surface is something far more complex, a self-protection mechanism. Emotional detachment, aloofness, and avoidance are not always signs of apathy. They're frequently signs of someone trying to guard themselves from emotional pain. Self-protection can take many forms. Some people withdraw the moment they feel vulnerable. Others act indifferent to avoid appearing too invested. They might keep conversations surface level, avoid emotional topics, or physically distance themselves when things get intense. These behaviors aren't necessarily conscious. They're often rooted in past experiences where openness led to hurt. For someone who has been abandoned, betrayed, or repeatedly disappointed, emotional closeness may feel more like a threat than a comfort. At its core, emotional self-protection is about survival. It's a way to minimize risk, especially the risk of rejection, judgment, or loss of control. Letting someone in requires trust, and for people who have been emotionally wounded, trust doesn't come easily. So instead of facing the discomfort of being vulnerable, they build walls. They might create emotional distance even in the middle of a conversation. They'll tell you they're fine when they're clearly not. Or they'll downplay their feelings to avoid seeming too much or too sensitive. In romantic relationships, this defense mechanism can be particularly frustrating. Just when things seem to be getting closer, the person suddenly pulls away. Plans are canceled, texts go unanswered, or emotional conversations are met with silence. This doesn't necessarily mean they're playing games. It might be their way of slowing things down to a pace they feel emotionally safe with. They're trying to protect themselves from the vulnerability that deeper connection brings. Unfortunately, self-protection often ends up hurting the very relationships people are trying to preserve. By avoiding vulnerability, they also block intimacy. By trying to prevent pain, they create distance. The emotional armor they put on for safety ends up becoming a barrier to connection. What they don't always realize is that while that armor might keep the hurt out, it also keeps love, support, and understanding from getting in. Recognizing this dynamic can help make sense of confusing behavior. Emotional retreat isn't always a rejection of you. It's often a reflection of their internal struggle to balance the desire for closeness with the instinct to stay safe. As much as we want to believe there's always a deeper emotional reason behind someone's distant or confusing behavior, sometimes the truth is more straightforward and harder to accept. There are situations where a person acts like they don't care simply because they don't. They may not be emotionally invested, they may not see the relationship in the same light, or they may not value the connection as much as you do. And while this realization can be painful, it's also essential for clarity and emotional self-protection. Not every emotionally unavailable person is secretly hiding deep feelings. Some are simply detached by choice. They may be in a phase of life where they don't want serious emotional entanglements, or they may lack the desire to connect on a deeper level altogether. In some cases, people become so accustomed to keeping their relationships transactional or surface level that they don't feel the need or the responsibility to offer more. What complicates things is that this type of emotional detachment can sometimes look like the same kind of guardedness we see in people who are scared or emotionally inexperienced. They may give mixed signals, affectionate one day, cold the next. They may keep the connection alive just enough to keep you close, but never go deep enough to build anything real. This inconsistency can leave you constantly second guessing, wondering if you're imagining things, or if maybe, just maybe, they care more than they're letting on. But someone who genuinely doesn't care won't show up consistently when it matters. They won't invest effort, communicate with depth, or make your emotional experience a priority. They might ignore your needs, avoid commitment, or dismiss your feelings when you try to bring them up. And while it's tempting to keep searching for a hidden emotional reason, hoping it's fear, confusion, or past trauma, the truth might simply be that they're emotionally unavailable because they're not interested in being otherwise. This kind of emotional indifference can be incredibly harmful if you stay in it too long, trying to decode or justify it. Sometimes we project emotional complexity onto someone because we feel deeply. We want to believe there's more going on because it hurts to admit we may be emotionally invested in someone who isn't equally invested in us. But recognizing the signs of genuine emotional disinterest is a critical step in protecting your own well-being and making space for relationships that are mutual, intentional, and emotionally fulfilling. When dealing with someone who acts emotionally distant, unclear, or inconsistent, it's easy to get pulled into a cycle of overthinking and self-doubt. You start analyzing every word, every text, every small gesture, trying to interpret whether they care or not. The emotional tug-of-war becomes exhausting. In this confusion, many people begin to lower their standards, accept mixed signals, and convince themselves that the potential of what could be is worth more than the reality of what is. This is where the importance of clarity and self-respect becomes non-negotiable. Clarity is not just about understanding how the other person feels, it's about getting real with yourself. Instead of asking, what does he mean by that? Or why is he acting this way? The better question is, what is this behavior doing to me? If someone's actions are leaving you feeling anxious, unseen, or constantly questioning your worth, then the emotional consequences are already speaking louder than their words. You don't need perfect closure or perfect explanation to validate your feelings. The way someone shows up or doesn't is a form of communication in itself. Self-respect means valuing your emotional energy, your time, and your dignity enough to walk away from ambiguity. It means refusing to chase love, validation, or attention from someone who consistently fails to meet you halfway. While empathy and understanding are powerful, they should never come at the cost of your self-worth. You can recognize someone's emotional limitations without sacrificing your own needs. You can care about someone while still choosing yourself. One of the most difficult truths to accept is that sometimes the person you want a deep connection with is simply not capable of giving it. Not because you're unworthy, but because they're not ready, not willing, or not equipped. And in those moments, your self-respect must speak louder than your hope. Choosing clarity means stepping away from emotionally unavailable people, not out of bitterness, but out of a deep understanding that you deserve more than In the end, your boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are standards to protect what matters inside. Your emotional health, your time, your growth, and your peace. If someone's presence in your life constantly makes you question your value, then it's not love, it's confusion. And confusion is never a foundation for a healthy relationship.